Hey everyone! Today we're going to dive into two really big ideas that pretty much shape everything around us, our world, our communities, even how we see ourselves. We're talking about individualism versus collectivism. You can think of it as the ultimate showdown, me versus we.
Okay, let's kick things off with something you can probably relate to. Picture this, your school cafeteria, right? And they suddenly ban your all-time favorite lunch. Maybe it's pizza, maybe it's fries, to bring in a super healthy menu for everybody. So, your personal choice? Poof, it's gone. That feeling, that little bit of tension between what you want and what's being decided for the good of the group, well, that's exactly what we're getting into today. And that's the big question, isn't it? How do we balance those two things? This isn't a new problem, by the way. For hundreds, even thousands of years, thinkers and philosophers have been wrestling with this idea. How do you weigh the needs of one person against the needs of the many? And believe me, how a society answers that question ends up defining pretty much everything about it.
Okay, so let's start digging into this. We're going to begin with the side that really focuses on the individual. You could call it the world of me.
So what are we actually talking about when we say individualism? Well, at its core, it's a way of thinking that really values self-reliance, personal freedom, and what you can achieve. The idea is that the individual's goals are what matter most. Now, to help remember the key principles of individualism, there's a pretty cool acronym, P.R.I.C.E.S. Let's break it down real quick. P is for private property, the right to own your own stuff. R is for rule of law, which just means the law applies to everyone equally. I stands for individual rights and freedoms. Think freedom of speech, that kind of thing. C is for competition, the idea that when we compete, it pushes everyone to be their best. E is economic freedom, the freedom to make your own financial choices. And finally, S is for self-interest, which sounds a bit selfish, but the idea is that when people pursue their own goals, it often ends up benefiting everyone.
This whole focus on the individual is actually a pretty modern idea. If you went back to the Middle Ages, you weren't really seen as you. You were defined by your group. You were a peasant or a noble. Individuality wasn't really a thing. But then during the Renaissance, you start to see this shift. Art and culture begin to focus on the individual. And it really takes off during the Enlightenment, when thinkers started saying, hey, wait a minute, people have rights. Things like the right to own property, speak freely, and these ideas were so powerful they sparked actual revolutions.
And that's the really crucial part. These weren't just ideas for philosophers to talk about in fancy rooms. They became the building blocks for things we see all around us today. Ideas like liberalism, democracy, and free market capitalism. It all grew out of this new focus on the individual.
All right, let's switch gears. We've talked about me, so now let's explore the other side of the coin, collectivism, or the world of we.
So collectivism, it's a totally different starting point. It's a way of thinking that values the goals of the group and the common good over the goals of any one person. The core belief here is that we're all connected, that we depend on each other. It's all about human interdependence.
And you'll see the principles here are kind of the flip side of what we just talked about. We've got things like collective interest, what's best for everyone. There's collective responsibility, the idea that we're all in this together. Instead of competition, the big idea is cooperation. We see things like economic equality and public property. And finally, a big one is adherence to collective norms, basically following the group's shared values.
And you don't have to look far to see collectivism in action. Just think about things like universal healthcare, public schools, or even labor unions. These are all built on a collectivist idea, that we all contribute to a system that, hopefully, benefits everyone in the group. Seeing them side by side like this really makes the differences pop, doesn't it? Individualism says individuals are unique and important. Collectivism says the group is more important. Individualism says competition is the way to go. Collectivism says cooperation is key. Private property versus shared property, individual responsibility versus group responsibility. You can see there are really two very different lenses for viewing the world.
But is it always that simple? Just pick a side?
Well, one philosopher had a pretty serious warning for us.
Yeah, this is from a guy named Ludwig von Mises, and his point is pretty powerful. He said, the goals which are elevated over those of the individual are merely the goals of those who exert power over the collective. Whoa, so what he's saying is, a group doesn't actually have goals, only individuals do. And often, what we call the goals of the group are really just the goals of the people in charge. It's something to think about for sure.
So that brings us to the real world, right? Where things are almost never black and white, 100% one thing or the other. So does a society have to choose? Is it either total individualism or total collectivism? Well, for most places, the answer is no, not at all. It's all about finding a balance.
Let's look at a Canadian example.
We value freedom of speech, right? That's a super individualist value. You have the right to express your own opinions, but there's a limit. We have hate speech laws. You're not allowed to use that freedom to promote hatred against a group. See what's happening? We're balancing an individual right with the safety and well-being of the collective.
And that's pretty much how most liberal democracies work. They blend values from both sides to try and serve the common good. It's like a constant negotiation, this push and pull, trying to protect individual freedoms while also making sure we have a society that works for everyone.
Okay, so let's do a super quick recap of the main things you gotta remember. First, individualism puts me first. It's all about personal rights, freedom, and self-reliance. Second, collectivism puts we first, focusing on group goals, cooperation, and shared responsibility. And maybe the biggest takeaway of all, most societies we live in today, like ours, aren't just one or the other. They're a blend of both, constantly trying to balance the needs of the individual with the needs of the group.
All right, let's see if you've got this. First question. Working at the mall to make money for yourself, is that an example of individualism or collectivism? Think about it. Yep, that's individualism. Why? Because the motivation is your own self-interest, your personal gain.
Okay, one more. What about volunteering for the Red Cross? What do you think?
Okay, one more. What about volunteering for the Red Cross? What do you think? That's a perfect example of collectivism, right? You're giving up your own time to help other people in the community for the common good. Awesome job, everyone.